Do any of you have a pendulum clock? A couple of you. Is it loud? Can you hear it? Have you noticed, when I was very young, my grandparents had a 250-acre farm in northwest Missouri, and we would go out there as kids a lot. It was, to us, it was a real paradise. But they had a mantle clock, pendulum clock. You had to wind up and keep tuned up. But in the daytime, you didn't really notice the tick-tock. But in the middle of summer, there was no air, there was no fan, nothing going. It was just hotter than blazes, and sweating, high humidity. And you could hear that clock. It sounded like somebody was hammering something in the middle of the night. So it's kind of interesting that is going on all the time. That tick-tock, that sound is going on all the time. But when you are engaged with just normal life, you don't hear it. It blends in with everything else. But when everything else shuts down, then you hear it. And that's a little bit like the meditative process. There is a voice, and it's not really a voice, but it's a presence that is always with us. But we are so engaged in the surface level of life that we don't hear this. We don't tune into it unless we take a special time to do that. And that would be the equivalent to moving into the middle of a night and where all things are quiet except that one thing. And then we become aware of it. But we rarely do this. And unless we're in a teaching like this, unless we've been exposed to this, Jesus talked about going into your closet, into your inner closet, shut the door, and pray to the Father who's in secret. I think this is basically what he's talking about. Get to the place where all you hear is the tick-tock. All you hear is the clock. And we're so engaged with life, at night we try to go to sleep and we try not to hear those things. In the daytime, we don't want to use our time doing that because we've got so many other things to do, so many other things take our attention. What that busy level is generally our consciousness. It is where we dwell most of the time. And when we talk about life, somebody says, "How's your life going?" Our response usually has to do with how that movie is playing, how that level of thought and emotion is running all the time. If we've had some event come up and it's kind of upset the normalcy of our life, our thoughts and emotions all just take off in that direction, and we'll say, well, it's not going so great right now. But it's important to understand that ticking clock is still the same. It's underneath that disturbed area. And we obviously, when our attention is drawn to outer things, that's where we go, and the deeper we get into that, the further we get from that underlying reality. And so it seems like our life is really in bad shape. We're just experiencing the surface, the thought and emotion that is generally our consciousness. And consciousness is a word that it's difficult to define it because it's defined in so many ways, thought of in so many ways in our society. When researchers talk about consciousness, they're just talking about our general awareness, conscious being, not necessarily, and the near-death researchers treat it as the soul. And that's how I would tend to treat it, but it's more helpful, I think, to break it down and just say that consciousness is the sum total of our belief system. And consciousness changes. Haven't your beliefs changed over the years? You were all exposed to certain ideas when we were young. I, like many of you, was taken to church, and was exposed to all of the traditional mainstream ideas that go to make up our Christian belief system. And over the years, I have questioned some of those, and I have changed my thinking about them. So my consciousness has evolved, some may say has devolved, but I think it has evolved in that when Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free," I'm freer now than I was then. That's how I measure it. You judge the closeness that you are to truth by how free you are. I mean, if you use that as the measure, and I think that's a good way to think of it. Because the closer you get to the truth of who you are, the freer you are. We get into all kinds of levels of bondage because we're trying to be something we're not. And that's, I think that makes perfect sense, that you know the truth about yourself. The more you know about the truth of yourself, the freer you are. The less airs you put on, the less roles you have to play, you feel you have to play. But consciousness is the belief system. It's the sum of our beliefs, and that's where we're living most of the time. If we're saying I'm having a bad day, we're really judging not the reality, the ticking clock beneath. We're not looking at that. We're looking at whatever's happening on the surface. And we're saying I'm not having a good day here. That's my consciousness. I'm saying things should be a certain way and they're not, so I'm having this reaction and I'm not having a good day. Is there really such a thing as a good day and a bad day in reality? Because when you think about it, what is a day? If you got into a spaceship and you flew into the blackness above the earth, you were not on a spinning planet, would you have day and night? You would have light and darkness. If you face the sun, you'd have light, and you turn your back to it, you'd have darkness, but you'd still have light. Light is always there. There's not day and night. That's an illusion. It is relative to our experience on this planet. And so much of our consciousness is that way. Our belief system is built around how we perceive ourselves, who we think we are, what we've been told is true about us, what we've accepted. And you add to that the religious influence and the scientific influence and all of the, the education we may have gotten or may not have gotten, and you put all this together and you say, that's me. And so we have this peg that says, here's me, and if anything upsets me, I'm having a bad day. But in truth, the clock is still ticking underneath. So it has nothing to do with how I'm seeing myself. And that's really important in this whole spiritual thing, is to realize that no matter how bad things look, there is these everlasting arms underneath this deeper reality. And we can drop down into that and have another experience. And that dropping down into that, it sounds like totally useless exercise, but it is absolutely not. Because you find your point of strength there, and you look at the thing that is upsetting to you in a different way. And I've said many times, if you're looking at something from a place of weakness, it looks very different than if you're looking at it from a point of strength. It can be the exact same thing. In one view, you're totally overwhelmed. The other is, what's that? It's nothing. And that's consciousness. So it's important to understand that we're really dealing only with consciousness when we're dealing with prayer, when we're dealing with meditation. Meditation's dropping down beneath that surface to reconnect with who we are at the deepest level, so we can come back up to the surface and reinterpret things, say that it's not as bad as it looks. So from one of my books on prayer and meditation, the world in which we live is a product of our consciousness. And think of this as more of your perception of the world in which you live, rather than this, you look out and you see cars and you see Like, you didn't create all that. You create your interpretation of that, and you react to that. The world in which we live is a product of our consciousness. In fact, it is our consciousness. You and I rarely experience the full potential of any event. We experience our feelings, our interpretation of the event. So is this thing happening, or is it my perception? And I'm not trying to take the road of a very impractical, airy-fairy kind of thing. It's just understanding what's going on when I'm naming something as not good, and I'm reacting to that, and I'm having a bad experience. That what I am doing is interpreting, and I'm reacting to my interpretation. So the question is, if that's true, can it be changed? And that's what prayer is all about. It's not about changing the world, it's about changing our perception. It literally means, the word prayer in Aramaic, as I pointed out many times, slotha, to make an adjustment. Doesn't mean to adjust the world, it means to make an adjustment in the way you see the world. To realize that that clock is ticking even when we can't hear it. And the adjustment I make is to drop down into a place where I can hear it. And when I get to that place, that's can't think of his name, not Teilhard de Chardin, but Paul Tillich. He called it the ground of being. That's where you hear the clock, the ground of being. So we get there, that's our center of power, and then we come out of that back into the world. Like Jesus said, go to your closet, listen to the clock, but come back out, and enter the world again. I'm not all for heading to mountaintops and, contemplating my navel for the rest of my life. You could do that, and people do that. But why would you come, as I've asked many times, why would you come to Earth and then try to escape it? That makes no sense. If you want to escape it, go shoot yourself. Go drive off of a cold shivers or something. Just make sure there's no ledge beneath where you drive off, like one fellow did a couple of years ago. Not good planning. But I'm not encouraging anybody to do that. Just make sure you are clear on that. That's my disclaimer, and I will sign it right now. And I forgot what I was saying, even so it doesn't matter. Let's go to the next thing. It's important that we understand the nature of the world we are praying from, and that's what I'm saying here. We're in the busy, we can't hear the clock. My life is a mess. So I'm praying from a perception, a certain perception of the world. I'm praying from this, and I'm probably praying, God, please help me fix it in some way. When we have a need, the solution nearly always involves a shift in our unique perspective of the situation to make an adjustment. So I'm up here looking at how bad everything is. I'm calculating, I'm just weighing everything out, and the challenge, it's a thing that is larger than me. I don't have the resources to handle it. I don't know what to do. I have no knowledge on what to do. I don't have the money to pay for it. I don't have the strength to take the next step. I don't have the faith that things are working out. I don't know what to do. So that's on the level where we can't hear the clock. And what we want to do is drop down. First of all, recognize what's happening. Life looks really bad right now because I am at a certain level of perception that is not working. It works, but it's not working on my behalf. It's working against me. It's a level of perception that is causing me to say there are good days and there are bad days, when in truth there are no days at all. No days, no nights. There just is. When I get off of this earthly mentality I find that the sun is always shining. The light is always present. It's not one or the other. It's always there. It's omnipotence. That's what it means. All power everywhere, present equally at the same time. Omnipresence. We can never leave the presence of God. But we certainly can get to the place where we can't hear the clock. And that's called a problem. And we have them all the time. And so what is this spiritual thing for? Is it to advance our consciousness to the place where things never happen, bad things never happen? Or is it to get to the place where we understand why we're having a bad day? That it has very little to do with what's actually going on outside of myself, and everything to do with how I'm perceiving it. That puts the ball in my court all the time. And that's what the spiritual thing is about. It's not about changing the world. It's about changing how we see the world. The world is just fine. I said last week, you ask any animal, what needs to be fixed in this universe? And they'll say, I don't know. Nothing. It's working just fine. I have a place to live. I eat. Lots of fresh air. They don't have the ability to make problems, to create perceptions. They hear the clock all the time. I believe they do. I can't say for sure. But they act like they do. We have a cat that just turned 1 year old, and it's just such a blessing to have an animal around that you can observe and see that it, at a moment's notice, it can just go to sleep. It can be in a fighting mood one moment and just totally forget the next. It's like animals are present. Their world is fine. They see the world, they see this universe as a good place. But you get up to the human level and we have all kinds of problems. It looks horrible, so I better take some Valium. So does that actually fix the world? It does for a little while, because it fixes your perception. I don't know about Valium. I've never taken Valium, but I've taken some drugs that make your life look different. And prescription drugs, and they're nice. But you know what the problem is? You got to go back and buy more. It never lasts. So it's something, it alters consciousness, but it's not a change of consciousness. And there's a place for these things. Unity is not an anti-doctor, anti-drug move, at least the unity I understand. But you got to be careful of that stuff. That's the opioid thing. That's a big deal now. It's all legal, and it's killing a lot of people. But that's another subject. So it's important that we understand the nature of the world we're praying from, and that's really it. I'm having a bad day. Really? Is it the day, or is it my perception? Because if it's the day, I can't do anything about it. I think I'll go out and check. I'll ask everybody else around me, are we having a bad day? And they'll say, no, I'm not having a bad day. It's a good day. Well, you must not really know what's going on then. So we go to the next person. Are you having a bad? No, I'm having a good day too. So it must not be the day. Maybe it's me. And I start looking at that. It's important. Where I'm praying from, where I'm seeing from. When we have a need, the solution nearly always involves a shift in our unique perspective of the situation. That's the clock's always ticking. Can we drop down into that level? It's not the thing happening that is our primary concern. It sure seems like it. And I would not talk to anybody in terms of counseling and say, what you're going through is just, it's not real. Just forget it. Just pretend like it's not even there, because it's not. I would never say that to somebody. And if anybody ever said that to me, they may end up with a black eye, because you resent that kind of thing. When you are suffering, it doesn't matter what the cause, even if you're doing it to yourself, you don't want to hear this is really just your problem. It's just not happening in reality. When you want to hear that and should hear it is when you're not going through something. So you can understand the principle and you can maybe remember that when something comes up. You can apply it then. It's not when you're hurting. It's often difficult to move to a higher place when you're hurting and you don't know where to go, when you are suffering. It's not what the thing that's happening that's our primary concern, but how we feel about the thing that we're seeking to change. And that's how I would talk to somebody, is that, okay, what's going on in you right now? How are you feeling about this whole thing? Do you realize this will pass? Have you been here before? Just kind of to speak to them, do unto others as I would like them to do unto me. That's how I think about it. It's like, how can I help lift someone out of a perspective that is hurting them? And I have seen this thousands of times in counseling. Somebody will come in one way and they'll leave another. The world is the same. Nothing's changed out there. But their perception has changed. And that's what counseling is about. It's not about giving them something they don't have. It's about reminding them of something that they do have. The clock is ticking. And it's a process of helping the perception get down to that level where we understand that things are working, that it's really okay. But yes, I've been here 1,000 times. I've had 1,000 problems. How many do you still have of the 1,000 you've had? Well, just this one. So what's that tell you? It tells you this too shall pass. This is a perception that the deeper reality is the thing that is going to come to the surface. This is where we focus. We don't pretend like the problem isn't there. Again, that's so much of our new thought is this woo-woo, airy-fairy stuff. And it just turns me off totally when we get that type of thing. And it's, I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional, but I'll see it on Facebook a lot. It's like people, you're going through a struggle or something and people come up with ideas that are just, this is really not real or whatever. And however they say it, there's 1,000 ways to say it. But there's nothing wrong with going through a struggle. There's nothing wrong with admitting you're hurting. It's, if you think that hurting is failure, if you think that depression is failure, if you think that despair is failure, you got to think again, because there are no failures. No matter how deep into despair you are, the clock is still ticking. Your soul is still there, still intact. The reality of you is there. So you have these dark moments. Maybe they last for years. But you are still okay. And if you make the right connections with people or books or just in your own thinking, you will change that. Because you have that authority, you have that ability to understand that the problem is consciousness. It's not the thing that you're concerned about, it's consciousness. The simplest observation can show you that your reaction to the event is the thing that is upsetting you. Now, if you came here today with a problem, and you are even right now thinking of other possibilities, maybe you're feeling some level of inspiration, some level of understanding where you're changing. You're not the same person you were when you walked through these doors. Okay, your problem is still there, but something in you is changing. So that should be a very strong indicator of the power that you have. Prayer does not change that thing out there. It may eventually. It changes your perception of it. And when your perception is changed, when your perception is from a higher perspective, you enter that thing with power. And the chemistry is different. It changes. The chemistry changes. That's what's important. But prayer is not focused directly on the thing, it's focused on our consciousness. Just think of the ticking clock, it's there. What I want to do is drop down into that place where I hear that. I get that assurance that I'm something more than just this fleshly being with a problem. That I'm an eternal being. This too shall pass. This is just something I'll forget in a few days or a few weeks or months or years or whatever. This too shall pass. So that's what it's all about. That's what the spiritual journey is about. It's not getting from here to there someplace, this evolved, high evolved state. It's waking up to how it works. That your problem is in consciousness. And that's not to say that we don't have physical ailments, and there's probably no more difficult thing to deal with than pain, physical pain. It's kind of hard to say, like Mary Baker Eddy said, you can't have a headache because you don't have a head. It's pretty extreme. It's true. Your soul has never, ever had a headache. But your body sure has. And when your body has a headache, do you want to hear that? You can't have a headache because you don't really have a head. Okay. Give me that Aleve and I'll see if I can believe what you're saying. So you deal with the problem at that level, and physical pain is very difficult to deal with. Financial pain is very difficult. It's all difficult to deal with. But the point is, we can deal with it. And we start with consciousness. I am not my body, I have a body. That's true. Mary Baker Eddy was absolutely right. But we don't want to hear that absolute statement when we're going through pain. We want to deal with it at its level. So it's, did I just do this one? Yeah, I did. When we view Earth from space, we clearly see the thin blue layer of atmosphere that surrounds our globe. I think these are just gorgeous pictures, these kinds of things. From Earth, the sky appears to be blue. The sky appears to be blue. But as we move beyond this cushion of air that is vital to our physical existence, we see the space beyond as black. Think of your consciousness in a similar way. We're seeing blue. We're seeing through a consciousness. Paul said, through a glass darkly, when things appear to be so limited. But we see not life as it is, but as we are at any given moment. A very important principle. Because then we can say, okay, I can change that. I can allow that to be changed. I can experience something deeper. I can drop down to the ticking clock level. You're enveloped in an atmosphere of consciousness that causes you to see the events of your life in a specific way. Okay, I've pretty much covered that. So meditation expands the way you see. That's a real important principle. The objective of meditation is to let go of the way you're seeing any given problem so that you may see it from the deeper level, from the deeper awareness of this too shall pass. This is going to pass. How will you feel as it passes? And what am I at the deeper level? Am I to be blown about like a rudderless ship, that by everything that comes along and pushes me this way or that way, or am I something more? Am I something greater? And the answer is I'm something greater, but I can't answer that with my head. I have to drop down to that place to know it. And that's what meditation is. It's a letting go of the surface. You begin to sense that your being is resting in an all-sustaining atmosphere of life, love, power, and intelligence. And that regardless of circumstances, you will be fine. When you're having a problem and you get to that place where you know it's going to be okay, that's your center of power. That's where you want to get. And your prayer begins to be answered, begins to be reflected. Touching this inner reality changes your perspective. Instead of reacting to your situation, you begin to affirm the truth that God is your source. And don't let that just be a cliche. You're dropping down into that level. That's your source. That's your real being. That is God. Call it whatever you want. But it's your essence. Your changeless essence. God is your true guiding light. Your consciousness then begins to conform to this new understanding. And you approach it with a new vitality and renewed strength and optimism. It's finding your point of strength, and it comes out. Completely different perception. When you can't seem to change a situation through prayer, don't give in to frustration. I'm an expert at that, giving in to frustration. I've done it many times. I know exactly how to do it. It's very easy. Give in to frustration and just act like the world is going to hell. It just is not going to work, and nothing's helping, and prayer's not going to do it. Nothing's going to do it. Am I the only one that's ever done that? Or I guess maybe 2 or 3 of you have done that too. So don't give in to frustration. How do you not give in to frustration when you're frustrated? You understand the principles. What is this frustration? Why can't I hear the ticking clock? I'm making a choice to stay at the surface. I'm making a choice to look at that thing and say, this is hurting me. And so I must react to it. So we stop that type of dialogue. We stop that type of thinking. We use your energy to gain a higher, broader perspective of the event. And you do that by just taking time to let it go. Change your consciousness and know the situation will reflect this change. That's the important thing. Once you touch that place in yourself where you know it's okay, it doesn't matter how it works out. You know it will. And you're coming from your point of strength. And that's hopefully gives you an idea, as if you don't already have an idea, but of what consciousness is, how it plays into this whole thing. All right? Thanks for coming out. Have a good week.
You've been watching a talk presented at the Unity Church of Grand Junction by Reverend Doug Bator. We would like to thank everyone who joined us here today in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado, as well as those of you who are joining us online. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Also, please feel free to share this video with anyone you think might be interested or benefit from this message. If this video brought value to your life, please consider making a donation by clicking the link below to our PayPal donation account. Thanks again so much for watching.